And now we are looking at the second part of the early Muslim expansion of the era conquest of Iran and Egypt.
We last left the Muslim Syrian campaign in the aftermath of Abu Ubaidah and Khalid ibn al-Walid's triumph over the Romans at Yarmouk. Exhausted from that long 6-day struggle, the Muslims remained camped around Jabiya for a month, collecting the bounties of war and recuperating their strength. The scant few of Heraclius' warriors who survived the massacre fled north to the relative safety of northern Syria, leaving Palestine at the mercy of the Islamic forces. Without an army to check his progress, Abu Ubaidah assembled his generals in October 636 to decide how best to exploit the situation. Some argued for an attack on the strategic linchpin of Caesarea, a coastal fortress whose garrison could be indefinitely reprovisioned by the Roman navy if besieged, but which could also serve as a potential beachhead for a counterattack if not taken. If the Muslims got it, the campaign for Palestine would be over. However, other commanders pointed inland towards a much simpler and symbolically enticing target, Jerusalem. Not only could this isolated city be strangled into submission with relative ease, but the loss of their holiest place would be a crushing blow to Roman Christian morale. Unable to come to a decision, Abu Ubaidah sent a message to Caliph Umar asking his opinion. The reply was simple: take Jerusalem. So, Abu Ubaidah led the Muslim army straight at the holy city.
You know, both areas seem kind of really good to take. Like Caesarea, as he mentioned, could be a potential beach landing for a counterattack. Probably harder to besiege through supplies, so taking it I feel like would definitely be beneficial. But again, Jerusalem, man, it's really symbolic for like Islam to take Jerusalem, right? Because it's under like Christian influence at the moment, and it is very renowned, obviously, as a very holy and important area. So obviously taking that would be a huge like morale breaker and kind of symbolic of Islam taking over, right? So I feel like, yeah, definitely Jerusalem does kind of edge out a little bit more in terms of like how devastating it would be. So definitely the right choice, I think. But you know, that was interesting. Both options seem like they would have been incredibly beneficial for the Muslims.
Realizing what was about to happen, Jerusalem's patriarch Sophronius secretly sent the holiest Christian relics, including the True Cross, off to Constantinople by sea. The raiding Arab mobile guard under Khalid reached Jerusalem sometime in November, just before the rest of the army, and this prompted the Roman garrison to pull back inside. Discovering to their chagrin that its fortifications had been reinforced after Yarmouk in anticipation of just such a siege, the 5 commanders, Abu Ubaidah, Khalid, Yazid, Amr and Shirabil, nevertheless blocked off all passage in and out of Jerusalem. This state of affairs continued for 4 months in a relatively uneventful siege, of which few details survive. The situation in the city must have become unbearable though, because in March 637, Sophronius offered to surrender Jerusalem if Umar himself came and personally signed the treaty with him. When these terms became known, Shirabil suggested that Khalid, whose appearance was relatively similar to that of the Caliph, should impersonate their leader and secure a quick surrender. However, this attempt at deception failed the next morning, because Khalid was far too well known in the Levant by this point.
Like the little devious ploy there, that's hilarious. That was interesting.
When it did, Abu Ubaidah instead dispatched a message to Medina explaining the situation. A few weeks later, having made the long journey from Arabia, Caliph Umar arrived near Jerusalem. Khalid and Yazid greeted him, both dressed in fine silk clothing, but this annoyed Umar, a firm enemy of luxury and a proponent of the Spartan way of life. Seeing his generals in such a state of apparent excess, the Caliph picked up some pebbles and threw them at the two stunned men, shouting, "Shame on you that you greet me in this fashion. It is only in the last 2 years that you have eaten your fill." The Caliph's rage was quickly sated when Khalid and Shirabil revealed that they were in fact still carrying armor and weapons beneath their fine outer garments. Drama aside,
yeah, that's an interesting character trait of Umar. Definitely more. That was an interesting little episode right there.
quickly got down to business and negotiated with Sophronius, with the result that Jerusalem was opened to the Muslims by late April. It is said that the pact between Umar and Sophronius recognized Christians as a protected people with the right to practice their own religion in return for the jizya, but this covenant of Umar is probably apocryphal. Now that the holy city of Christendom was in his hands, the Caliph conferred with his commanders and then went back to Arabia. The Syrian army then split into thirds, with Ammar and Shirabil moving to reoccupy and secure Palestine, Yazid besieging Caesarea, while Khalid and Abu Ubaidah moved to begin the conquest of northern Syria. With the situation in the region seemingly hopeless after the Yarmouk disaster, Emperor Heraclius sailed from Antioch and withdrew back into Anatolia, intent on consolidating Byzantine military strength and protecting the remainder of his empire. Once the ship departed, it is said that Heraclius said the words, "Farewell, a long farewell to Syria, my fair province. You are an enemy's now. Peace be with you, O Syria, what a beautiful land you will be for the enemy's hands." Despite this effective abandonment, some of the Roman garrisons were still determined to resist the Arab advance.
Yeah, he basically said, "See ya." He's already given up on Syria. Fair though, like, after Yarmouk and like losing all this, like, there's really, I don't see anything he could do to like drive off the Muslims. It's lost, you know? And yeah, taking Jerusalem was incredibly easy for them. It was just them waiting. So, again, like, Syria's basically lost, right?
From Jerusalem, a 17,000-strong force under Khalid and Abu Ubaidah marched unopposed to Damascus and then even further north to Emesa. From there, Khalid was dispatched with his elite mobile guard to Chalcis, modern Kinisrin, but was intercepted on a plain at nearby Hazir by 7,000 men under the town's Roman commander, Menes. He deployed his limited forces in 3 divisions, a center and 2 wings, placing himself at the forefront. Khalid charged with his Arab cavalry, and soon enough a fearsome mounted engagement was underway. After only a short amount of time, however, Menas was slain amid heavy fighting, and his troops, who loved their general, went wild with fury. Despite their numerical inferiority, the Roman troops matched the Muslims pound for pound in the head-on clash, pushing them back a little, but committing themselves too much. To exploit the opportunity, Khalid detached a unit of cavalry from one of his wings and led it around the Byzantine line, attacking his enemy from the rear and defeating them. It is said that not a single Roman survived this engagement at Hazir. Following this victory, in June 637, Khalid moved on Chalcis itself, where the garrison was stubbornly fortified in the town's citadel. Rather than launching an assault, the Muslim general merely demanded those inside and the defenders surrender, which they did soon after. Abu Ubaidah rejoined Khalid at this point, and the pair moved north to Aleppo, where they defeated a minor Byzantine force commanded by Joachim in a pitched battle outside the city. Much like at Chalcis, the Romans retreated into their fortifications, a hilltop citadel outside Aleppo itself. Joachim sallied out a few times in an attempt to break the siege, but failed, and by October 637, the city was in Arab hands. The greatest Roman city in Syria, Antioch, was now close. To precipitate an attack on it, Ubaidah sent a strike force to deal with the garrison at Azaz in the north, so that no Roman units could hit them from the flank as they were taking Antioch. This was done swiftly, and when the strike force returned, Ubaida's advance on Antioch began. When the Muslim army was 12 miles from one of the urban jewels of the Byzantine Empire, they were met at an iron bridge over the Orontes River by a powerful Roman army who had come from Antioch. Although the details of this Battle of the Iron Bridge are also unknown, it is clear that Khalid used his mobile guard to superb effect, crushing the Romans in a battle whose casualties were only exceeded by Ajnadayn and Yarmouk. In the wake of thousands of fleeing enemy soldiers, the Muslims approached and besieged Antioch. But taking the illustrious capital of the East was an anticlimax. Only a few days into Abu Ubaida's investment, October 30th, the weakened city surrendered on terms and its defenders were permitted to withdraw north unmolested. Having cleaved the Eastern Roman Empire into two disconnected pieces, Abu Ubaidah dispatched Khalid on a daring cavalry raid across the Taurus Mountains and into the Tarsus region, while the supreme commander himself thrust south down the Mediterranean coast, capturing seaports such as Laodicea, Gibala, Antarados and Tripoli, making it impossible for Emperor Heraclius to use the superior Roman navy to bring armies into the Levant. Although fighting in the area was far from over, by late 637, most generals of the Syrian campaign settled down to rule their respective regions as governors. At Hulwan,
that's insane. Like, as he mentioned, he just cleaved like the Roman Empire into right here in Syria. So like you have like Egypt and this part basically isolated from, you know, up here. And like I said, that's insane. Just like they're kind of playing like God mode now, I feel, where they're just winning almost effortlessly now. And again, that's just beyond impressive. Like I said, I've been so impressed by the rapid growth of the Muslim, you know, people and just how quickly they moved, you know. It really is just insane when you think about it.
Yazdegerd III was still eager to salvage his crumbling empire after the loss of Ctesiphon. To do this, he ordered the main Persian army under Miran and Khurizad to halt their retreat and turn to face the invaders near Jalula. Armies attempting to push north past the riverside town were forced to march through a narrow gap between the Tigris' Diyala tributary to the west side and an area of barely passable broken ground to the east. If Miran's 20 to 30,000 could hold this position, the remainder of northern Suwad and Sassanid territory east of the Zagros Mountains would be unassailable. With the aim of converting Jalula into an impenetrable fortress able to resist any enemy thrust, Miran immediately started digging in. A ditch was excavated 3 miles to the south, which connected the broken ground to the river, blocking the gap. Behind this trench were a number of other fortifications, artillery, and thousands of Persian archers, while in front were placed an array of wooden anti-cavalry caltrops. Recruits were mustered, armed, and trained from the local area, and provisions were gathered from around the nearby countryside. Jalula was to be a crucial battle. The moment Sassanid defensive works began around Jalula, word reached Sa'd in Ctesiphon that this was happening. As the Muslim general was just as keen to seize the fertile northern Suwad as his Persian enemies were to keep a hold of it, and wanting to push the defensive frontier eastward, Sa'd sent his nephew Hashim bin Utbah with 12,000 troops to reduce the Persian position. In order to prevent reinforcement or retreat, Sa'd also dispatched 5,000 men to deal with Persian governor Intak's garrison at Mosul. After several attempts at taking that city by storm, Muslim spies managed to secure the defection of a Christian Arab contingent in a betrayal which led to the fall of Mosul. In the main force heading for Jalula during March 637, Hashim brought with him many companions of Muhammad, as well as the ever-ferocious Kaka ibn Amr. Also in the Muslim ranks were several thousand Persian troops, along with Sassanid officers who had joined them after Ctesiphon. When the Arabs and their Persian units approached the Jalula Gap after a day's march from the former Sassanid capital, Hashim constructed his camp and deployed along the southern arc of Miran's protective trench, unwilling to launch an outright assault against it. So the situation remained in this manner for many months, during which reinforcements, provision and money were channeled into the fortified city from Hulwan, where Emperor Yazdegerd was continuously rallying additional forces. Aware that his situation was only going to worsen with time, Hashim ordered several attempts at storming the fortified ditch. Despite the disconcerting failure of Miran's wooden caltrops to stop Arab cavalry, Persian missile troops managed to overwhelm and repel these attacks. Afterwards, the Sassanids replaced the wooden obstacles with more effective iron ones. Demoralized due to their lack of success in breaking the Persian line, the Muslims ceased offensive actions for a while, and that gave Miran an opportunity of his own. Utilizing the constant steady stream of reinforcements coming his way, the Persian general began launching sorties against Hashim's positions, inflicting losses and gaining confidence as he did. Although the Muslim army was easily able to fight up to 80 of these attacks off when they arrived and pushed Miran back into his fortifications repeatedly, there was still no way to break the deadlock. With little other option, Hashim sent word back to Ctesiphon that he required reinforcements.
Yeah, I'm really impressed by the Persians. They have a really great defensive plan. So basically they've consolidated around Jalulu, have set up this ditch, though there's some opening here, but point is, they've consolidated, they've made defenses, and they're basically playing defense, right? I mean, granted, though, like they're a little more emboldened thanks to the stream of reinforcements, and are even going off to straight up attack the Muslims. But this is a really great defensive position they have. Like, their right is covered by the river, center the ditch, and now their anti-cavalry iron, what did he say they wore? Like, equipment. So for the most part, they're playing really well. I'm wondering how the Muslims are gonna counter. Like, I have to give it to the Persians, man. After so many devastating defeats, I kind of respect that they're still going for it. They haven't given up, even after losing basically their capital, right?
Had initially sent 600 infantry and 400 cavalry to bolster the army at Jalula, but this total was barely enough to replace the losses suffered during 8 months of battle and light siege. So soon after, another 500 cavalry reinforcements were dispatched, which included many competent Arab tribal chiefs who had fought against the Caliphate in the Ridda Wars. The Persians, having been themselves reinforced by Yazdegerd and emboldened by Muslim inability to break their defenses, now decided to go on the attack before Hashim was further reinforced.
I'm wondering, like I said, they have a great defensive position and could no doubt keep fighting that, like, a defensive, I feel like, for a very long time. Though I'm wondering now if they're getting too overconfident, because if they attack and it becomes a straight up pitched battle, I don't see them winning, man. I'm thinking they might be getting too confident and emboldened with some of their success here.
Miran also realized that simply waiting wasn't going to win him the battle. The only way to make the Muslim invaders leave was to inflict a decisive defeat on them.
It's true.
Deployment for an assault began with haste. Such Sassanid preparations for a major attack could not be concealed, and it immediately attracted Hashim's attention. This state of affairs was, however, also favorable to the Muslims.
Yeah, look at their pulling back. I'm wondering if they're trying to pull them back a bit away from the defense. Because I said, if this turns into a pitched battle, the Muslims are easily gonna win this. Like, they've taken the best of the Persian armies and defeated them, so like I said, this turns into a pitched battle. It's an instant loss, but it's also, like he mentioned, a bad position, because I said he can keep holding this defense for a long time, I believe, but again, that's not going to win him the battle. The Muslims aren't just going to leave, so Yeah, it's almost like a complete lose on either on either way, you know.
Were utterly sick and tired of sitting helplessly outside Miran's fortifications. So, to facilitate a pitched battle, Hashim withdrew his forces a short distance to the south, and allowed his Persian adversaries to cross their own entrenchments, thereafter arraying for battle opposite. The actual order of battle at Jalula is obscure to us, but we do know that two former apostate chiefs, Amr bin Madi Karib of the Zubayd family and Taleha bin Kalewad of the Banu Asad, were given command of the cavalry and infantry respectively. Now that the Persian rear was anchored by their own ditch, the only direction to move was forwards, and that is just what happened.
Yeah, like I said, I mentioned that they were moving back to lure them out, and it seems to work. Now their rear's completely covered by their own defense. This just seems like a recipe for complete disaster, right?
At Miran's command, the Battle of Jalula proper began with a full-scale Sassanid attack along the entire front, with archers and javeliniers loosing their projectiles before melee troops made contact. The charge struck with devastating impact, but Hashim's Muslims nevertheless resisted stalwartly for a time, refusing to give an inch of ground. This didn't last long, however, as the ferocious assault, fired up by constant shouts swearing vengeance for Qadisiyah and Ctesiphon, began punching small holes in various places along the Muslim line. These successful thrusts endangered the integrity of the entire Muslim front, and it was immediately clear to Hashim that the danger of total collapse was very real and perhaps imminent. To resolve the problem, Sa'd's nephew rode along his buckling line to speak inspirationally to those units which were weakening, proclaiming that if they persisted, this was the last battle they would have to fight.
Some things shouldn't be.
The present clash between Sassanid and Muslim troops became increasingly brutal, as both sides' missile units ran out of javelins and arrows, instead taking up melee weapons and charging into the slog themselves. Both armies had units battered into non-functionality by the extended fighting, but when this happened, the Persians were able to replace them, while Hashim had no such luxury. Because of this numerical disadvantage, one Islamic unit gave way and routed to the rear at about noon.
Yeah, again, I'm kind of like impressed by the Persian will to fight, and it does make sense that after all they've lost, that there is sort of like a rage and just a desperation in the way they're fighting, which is pushing the Muslims back. Though, we've seen this happen a lot of times before, where the Muslims are pushed back, certain parts of its army rout, but then immediately come back and fight, kind of creating gaps and like unevenness in the enemy. So I'm wondering if that's about to come to play as usual. But again, I am impressed by the Persians' will to fight.
Leaving a potentially fatal vacuum in the Muslim line. However, either because Miran did not notice the opportunity, or due to his soldiers' exhaustion, an attack on the position was not ordered, and Hashim scraped together some men to fill the position. Witnessing the flight of this unit, Kaka rode back and restored order, returning it to the battle. Almost unbearable desert heat and the brutal fighting led to the Persians halting their offensive just after this, and both sides disengaged. After a short rest, Miran planned to keep piling on the pressure, but Hashim had other plans. As his enemy had before, the Muslim general ordered his warriors to charge across the entire front, spoiling Miran's assault and initiating another grueling clash which lasted for over an hour without a decisive moment. Just before sunset, however, the wind whipped up and a storm rolled in from the south, a weather phenomenon which affected the Persians more than the hardy desert nomads. As the wind was now at the Muslims' back, granting them momentum in the advance, Hashim signaled Kaka ibn
Yeah, we've seen this before, like I think the legendary Battle of Cannae, where like the wind was to the Romans, like you know, like it Yeah, we've seen this before, and I think it's just like a very underrated aspect of just how the wind can affect you, or just how nature can play a part in battles, right?
To embark on a maneuver they had prepared beforehand.
Oh, snap.
While his general kept Miran occupied in the front, the buccaneering Arab warrior took a regiment away from the left wing unnoticed and managed to circle around the Persian rear. Instead of attacking immediately, Kaka left most of his outflanking force in a sheltered area to stop them being seen, then took a few outriders and a man with an incredibly strong voice close to the main crossing point over the Persian trench. Following the call, multiple things happened at once. First, the Muslim army, deceived by their own into believing that their general had reached the trench alone, attacked with renewed vigor and peak morale. At the same time, worried that large numbers of Muslims were now behind them, individual Sassanid units who did not have a strategic overview of the field panicked, lost cohesion, but did not break. The coup de grace was administered by Kaka himself, whose flanking force charged upon hearing the shout.
Again, the Muslims are the master of the flank, man. The oldest trick in the book, but they just keep performing it. Like I said, I've never seen the flanking maneuver more used than I have in this. And we've seen it a lot, but like, dang, in just one series.
Whirling into Miran's flank like a thunderbolt. At the impact, the Sassanid line was rolled up before being encircled entirely. Still, however, the Persian forces were stalwart, refusing to collapse utterly despite their unwinnable situation. Muslim forces continued attacking the encircled but still resistant forces of Miran all day, losing troops as they did. However, the Sassanid soldiers were only human. At sunset, as the sky began to darken, everything fell apart and the Persians routed, only to be cut down as they fled. A great mass of them, driven into the ditch and their own iron stakes by Hashim's army, perished terribly. Up to half of the Sassanid army perished at Jalula, while the remainder, including the town garrison, fled in the direction of Hulwan, and the town itself fell in December 637. Shortly after, Kaka rode in pursuit of the retreating enemy and defeated them, first at Kenikine, before besieging and capturing Hulwan in January 638. Emperor Yazdegerd retreated beyond the Zagros. When Kaka subsequently wrote to the Caliph asking permission to operate deeper in Persia, Umar would have absolutely none of it. Forbidding the operation, he replied, "I wish that between the Suad and the hills were a wall, which would prevent them from getting to us and prevent us from getting to them. The fertile Suad is sufficient for us, and I prefer the safety of the Muslims to the spoils of war." Expansion to the east was halted, but the Muslims were now looking towards the jewel in the Roman imperial crown, Egypt.
So I'm gonna end the video right there, but that's interesting. Umar is like, as I'm getting more information about him, is kind of interesting to me. Preferring a much more harsh, less luxurious lifestyle, I think speaks volumes of his personality and his character, and kind of being a bit, I mean, he is aggressive like all the Muslims are being in this series, but that this is a moment of like sort of, I guess, caution. I'm not sure if caution's the right word, but being reserved in a sense of not going too far. Like, he seems content with what he has for now. And definitely consolidating probably is playing a big factor. So I'm really looking forward to seeing more, because I'm finding Umar a bit more interesting as this goes on, And, yeah, we'll continue tomorrow. Bye, everyone. Gosh darn it.